Graham, if I may, since we're waiting for people to trickle in, it would be really interesting for me and my colleague Katie, who's on the call as well, if people would, if there's anybody who wants to volunteer or kick it off to say what has made this particular subject or this theme for a banter session of interest to you. Why have you signed up today, and why food resilience? I'd love to hear.
Looks like Sue was raising her hand. Off you go, Sue.
Oh, well, oh no, yes. Well, I can straight away tell you why that is. Apart from always interested in food and my diet and carbon footprint related to food and packaging and all that stuff. But then having watched the People's, whatever it's now called, the People
Emergency briefing.
emergency briefing. And I watched the one about food, and they talked about local and resilience. And I thought, I need to know more. That's me.
Wonderful, good. And if I'm going to run through a range of things, but so do let me know if there's anything in particular that I haven't answered that you'd like me to revisit at the end. Andrew, please.
Sure. I discovered by looking at the government's Prepare campaign, which talks about all the things we might be thinking about in terms of, there's a website presentation talking about emergency of different kinds, weather, floods, power outages, and so forth. And the one thing that wasn't there was food supply shortages. I'm thinking, well, of course, those can happen as a result of some of these other emergencies. Then we had the experience a few weeks ago where the government had been given an intelligence briefing about the dangers of food security, which had been apparently suppressed, and the newspapers had to sort of dig it out of government through a Freedom of Information Act. So I'm thinking, actually, this is it's like the elephant in the room, isn't it? As far as government's concerned, it's not being acknowledged. Great to see that the National Lottery has started their Climate Action Fund this year. Their theme is about food security. So that's, the word is spreading. But obviously, I had a good chat with Daphne earlier this week. We need to help the spread, but also, what do people therefore do locally? Absolutely. That's enough for me.
Thanks, Andrew. Frank, it would be great to hear from you.
Thanks, Jess. I'm in a primarily rural area, so we've got a range of villages that come together. We recently lost. Sorry, we recently lost a barn that was doing community supported agriculture and trying to sell veg boxes. We've got an egg food program that's also fallen by the wayside. So it's trying to understand, as communities who are committed to climate action, what can we do? There's a really good, healthy local growing group that advises each other, swaps seedlings, does good things like that. But it's then trying to work out what happens in the rest of the process. So great to pick up tips from other people and learn what your thoughts are.
Great.
Daphne, we're up to what I think is going to be as many as we're going to get. So if you'd love to start the ball rolling, thank you.
Annie's got a hand up. Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
sorry.
just, Brexit, climate change, monoculture, food supply, the war in Iran, how much food Britain imports, and Tim Lang's videos have been really alarming and interesting. And Kat in Wales is doing a lot of organizing around this, which is really good. And yeah, I just am like motivated to organize locally in my kind of small market town.
Wonderful. Yes, all of those little things, all of those hiccups, those tiny things. Can everyone see the presentation that I've put up?
Sure.
Great. All right. Well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining. Yes, this certainly is a timely conversation. So I really appreciate you joining, and I hope that the People's Emergency Briefing will incentivize more people to start asking these questions and to engage with the what ifs about food and the what's next about food. So I'm Daphne Du Cros. I live in Shropshire. I'm from Canada originally. I moved over here to do a PhD in food policy many, many years ago and was so shocked at the state of the food system that I hightailed it out of London to Shropshire and bought a small holding where We've run a market garden and have now transitioned to more of a community farm approach where we engage with our community. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later. But the key thing being, how do we build resilience together? What I want to talk about is my role at the Shropshire Good Food Partnership. And as I say, my colleague Katie is on the call as well. What is it that we do as a food partnership? I've included a map. We are not the only food partnership. There are 123 food partnerships across the UK through the Sustainable Food Places Network. So you may find that there is one in your neck of the woods. Please get in touch with them. Many of them are doing really great work in food resilience capacity building. So I'll speak to that as well shortly. But I think that what we can do as food partnerships is offer a really place-based, appropriate to context, and really plumbed in, networked in approach to food resilience. I have been supporting a group of food partnerships across this network to understand what they're doing in building food resilience. And I guess part of that is the context of where we are nationally. Food partnerships generally work across the food system. Don't let this image overwhelm you. What I wanted to do with this image, which is from a report from Corinna Hawkes, this just shows that food has a superpower. Food connects to so many different places in our system that it's an incredible lever for systems change. It's one of the few things that if we do some sort of intervention in one area, like teaching kids about food, we can see ripple effects across time and departments and sectors and space. We can have incredible impacts using food as a tool. So I would encourage you, as the day goes on, think about food and how it touches your life, and the things that you use to buy food, cook food, throw away food, and the different parts of the system that food touches in our lives. Within the food partnership, we do a lot of different kinds of work. We try to build networks within Shropshire and the Marches and different areas. Within the food system, we have 400 members who do loads of different things. Those might be councils, community organizations, community gardens, farms, farm clusters, academic institutions, schools, hospitality businesses, hotels, loads of different organizations. So we try to connect the dots across those. So nobody's working in isolation. We understand the web, and it's the web that connects us. We work on policy and advise in policy. We do research. We support our local food economy and make visible the food sector in our area. We do that through something playful called the Shropshire Good Food Trail, which is a way of shining a light on, as we say, the people who make, grow, sell, serve, and share good food. So we want to tell the stories. And I think humans are storytelling creatures. We really need to be talking about the wonderful things in our areas, get people understanding where their food comes from and why it's important. And we engage across a number of spaces is what I sort of want to get across here. So this is our food systems lens. And we also work at different scales. So we connect with, on the micro scale, individual farms, and then communities, town and parish councils, obviously Shropshire. We also work with our partners across the Marches for a bioregional approach, and that's Herefordshire, Monmouthshire, and Powys. We'll talk more about Powys later because they're doing absolutely incredible work, as Annie has said. And we also contribute to the national dialogue on food resilience, getting food farming and sustainability into the national curriculum, and a number of different areas. So the amazing thing about food is that it travels. We can tell the stories of what's happening in best practice in our communities, and we can share those at the national level. We can also take what's going on at the national level and distill it and tell people in our town and parish councils why this is relevant, what is happening, and we can support their work because this is a really interesting and emerging area. Which brings me to this part. What is our current food system context? Again, Annie said very rightly that we are in a really vulnerable situation. Tim Lang's report laid that out last year to underscore just how vulnerable we are within our food system. And the reports keep coming in a number of different ways from a number of different angles. Andrew mentioned the ecosystem collapse report that was suppressed by government. Not a good look. The Food Farming and Countryside Commission released a really exceptional community engaged report or from their food conversations about what people really want from our food system. And that was really intended to tackle the narratives, the false narratives of, oh, well, we couldn't possibly do that as a government because people don't want the nanny state. And, oh, but people want to eat chicken and chips in schools. And that really was this report was used as a tool to say, no, people want regulation. We want you to help keep us healthy. And another really interesting report was from Dolly Van Tulliken and Henry Dimbleby, which I've put in the resource pack that will sort of go along with this afterwards. But that talked about just how heavily lobbied government has been, and to our detriment as citizens. Also, we've got a massively top-heavy centralized food system, corporatized food system, and there's a really excellent report on that. So there are a number of things at play, and obviously geopolitical climate, not having recovered fully from the pandemic and the cost of living crisis. So we are seeing more crisis events coming hard and fast and compounding. Even above and beyond the sort of chronic condition of society that is a lack of knowledge. It is socioeconomic deprivation, poor health, heavy dependence on ultra processed foods. We are in the UK, our diet is 50% ultra processed food. Bump that up to 67% for school meals. It's a shocking situation. So we are vulnerable. We don't produce enough of our own food. We import 40%, and that's overall. That's a lot more when it comes to horticultural produce, fruit and veg. And the places that we get them from are going to be most heavily impacted by climate change. One of the key things for my soapbox is we talk about food a lot in terms of food resilience and crisis preparedness. What is really very rarely mentioned in that conversation is seed. So seed resilience, seed that underpins our food system, be it the blade of grass, the corn that is grown, all of our horticultural produce, everything we eat comes from a seed, be it through something else, but directly or indirectly. We are incredibly vulnerable once it comes to seed production in the UK, and that's not an area that's getting enough research or focus. So I have been working with Sussex University on a project that will be fed back to DEFRA on how we feed back, how we get more seed resilience built into our conversation about food system resilience. So I said the good news and the bad news. That was the bad news. The good news is we have food partnerships that are doing a heck of a lot of work on this, and we've got a lot of research that's shining a light on the situation. So our food partnerships are working, as I say, across the UK, filling that sort of middle space. Government is not engaging with this in a fast enough timeline. They aren't connecting the dots quickly enough. DEFRA is aware, but the government is a big juggernaut, and it has a very difficult time responding quickly, mobilizing quickly. The Ministry of Defense is interested about food resilience from the perspective of social disruption, but we as food partnerships have essentially have, just as it happens, because we work in food spaces within, as I say, a place-based context. We know our spaces, our landscapes, our networks, our key players. We have, in a sense, moved into the space that previously would have been the county agricultural offices in wartime. The only difference is we aren't resourced by government. We aren't funded by government. Most of us are charities, CICs. Some of us work within councils. So we are creating this sort of middle ground space where we're a conduit, as I said, going from those small levels and communicating between governments, academic institutions like our agricultural universities, which is another sort of middle ground player, and the bottom of the triangle, which is people. So what are we trying to communicate? Basically, things are a lot further along the road than we would like. We're on a knife edge essentially once it comes to our food system. The situation is getting more complicated by the day, and that was really highlighted with America's invasion of Iran because of fuel and fertilizer. A lot of people still don't understand, they will soon, but they don't yet understand the implications for the food system. Those are coming down the line. But that is only one example of a food system crisis. I talked about that ticking along under the surface, chronic social situation. And that's essentially our tinderbox. When people are disenfranchised, when they're vulnerable, those are the ones who are disproportionately impacted when a crisis hits. And we have seen different types of crises in the last few years. Obviously, we've all lived through the pandemic, but M&S getting hacked, co-op getting hacked, more Russian intervention and foreign intervention in political situations, extreme weather events like drought last year, which reduced our grain harvests by 24%. These aren't just things that are happening elsewhere. And international conflict being another one. So these acute events, which quite often don't happen in isolation, they're not solitary, they hit, they compound, or they ripple. That's when we get a bigger food system crisis. That's what we are moving into in real time now. So again, thank you for being here because this is crunch time. This is a really important moment to start putting our food system glasses on. A big reason for that is we have a job, we have a role in communication. As Tim Lang says, the approach from central government has always been don't spook the horses. But if we communicate from whatever roles you have, whatever positions of influence you have, if we communicate clearly and we set up structures to build people's preparedness and confidence, we can help people get more comfortable with discomfort. By being proactive, we can build confidence. Because what is not being said in a lot of these conversations is that a crisis situation makes people anxious, anxious people panic, and then we have social instability. And that's unpredictable. What we want to do is buffer that as much as we can at the hyperlocal level in advance so that when things do hit, we can be as buffered as possible. So we need to be relying on our communities and building capacity within our communities so that because if we're proactive, we can be responsive in a crisis rather than just reactive and panic. So what we've been doing at the Shropshire Good Food Partnership is, as I've said, working with the broader Sustainable Food Places network to bring together food partnerships that are in this headspace already. They are actively working on what does building food resilience in our community, our region, look like. So they're taking active steps. They're finding things that work for them based on their context. And that cluster, and report will be forthcoming on this soon, but that cluster is able to communicate out to the broader network of 124 members. So we are seeding those ideas so that we are creating a web across the UK. In the marches, we're working with our partners to figure out how we each have our superpowers and we can learn from individual projects and work to build resilience and capacity. So there's a lot of knowledge sharing and a heck of a lot of expertise. Powys is truly a leader in this, the Dyfed Powys area and Wales, as Annie said, through the Future Generations Act, has taken the food resilience piece on board seriously, with funding going to their food partnerships, which we don't have in England. But it does mean that good solid research is taking place on what that looks like. This is crucial. And that leadership and that research, recently at the Wales Food Security Summit, when it was sort of revealed with the framework and report again forthcoming, was inspiring and a real offers a real pathway to other food partnerships to utilize. So keep an eye out for that, and I'll be happy to share it when it comes out. In Shropshire, we've been doing a number of small pilot projects. Our context in Shropshire is that essentially our county council is facing bankruptcy. They haven't had the capacity to engage in food systems work. But what we have done as an opportunity, countering that, is we've started working with our Shropshire Association of Local Councils and our individual town and parish councils to identify those that might be interested in working on this. We have one food strategy for Shropshire, and that's where I live in Bishop's Castle because it's a project that I've led on. But we can use that as a model and hold that up as an example or a template that other places can use. Likewise, throughout the Sustainable Food Places Network, there are lots of examples of food strategies. So that's a starting place for a lot of communities. And some of the work that we have done has been running scenarios with communities. So key stakeholders, councillors, people working in the local food system to ask what if. So what would happen if we experienced a hacking event that took out the local Tesco? What would that mean for your community members, their food access, food waste? And another example is what would happen if there was a foot and mouth disease outbreak, a different kind of pandemic that would affect the supply chain. So we run these scenarios and we try to get people's understanding of how they would respond in their community, what the impacts would be. And that leads us into mapping assets and gaps. So that's taking a fearful situation and spinning it to be empowered through knowledge. So this is, I'm presenting this because this is part of what was presented at the DFID Powys event. And this is a very small part of the work that they showed, but it just gives the basic steps that they identified and timelines for how we would be able to approach civil food resilience. The first being get people talking about it. We can't fight an enemy that we don't see. People are very fearful, and we need to bring them into the headspace of this is something that we need to work on. And we need to do that in a sensitive way, considering we're surrounded by the collapse narrative. But this can be mobilized to empower people. We can talk about what local food needs are and who needs support the most, who needs catching, and then understanding our assets and gaps, what we've got going on locally and what are our strengths. Then from that, we can talk about, well, what do we need to implement? What do we need to put in place? And I'll come back to this shortly about what can be implemented on the cheap, actually. And then we can build from there. And next is, what would a plan be? What would hitting the big red button, crisis, emergency, this is not a drill. What would that plan look like in your community when we have to outline the what ifs, whose job it is, specific roles, and what happens over certain timelines? Is this a one-day thing, a one-week thing, a month, a year? And what happens if there are compounding crises? And running along all the time under these are building skills and capacity for people. I'll give some examples of that soon. But number 7 is we want to see more sustainable production. We are in a sort of triangle in Shropshire with Powys and Hereford of intensive poultry units, and the pollution is incredible. So we need to be thinking of how we work with our systems, consider our soil systems, our water systems, and how we support our food producers and growers through a transition that is more sustainable and more resilient in the long term. And finally, bringing it back to people. We have a highly centralized top-heavy food system. And we have been disconnected as people. We have traded a lot over the last 2 generations for convenience, but what we have done is we've undercut ourselves because we are dependent on a system and we are disempowered and unskilled. So, how's that? How's that so far? That's drinking from a fire hose. There's a lot of material there. Um, I can't really see too many people, but are there how many town and parish councillors do we have on the call? Just sort of vaguely by a show of hands. We've got a few. So one thing I promised in delivering this this presentation is, what's your role? What's your role in the revolution? What is your place in all of this and how we can support one another? This is going to be part of the report that we put out with Sustainable Food Places and Sustain coming up. But we have an amazing opportunity as councils and food partnerships and the boots on the ground community organizations to come together, because no one can do it in isolation. This has to be a whole of society approach. We need to take the learning that we had from the pandemic, reflect on that, because were some absolutely amazing things that came out of that situation. Overall, it was not a great situation, but what we found in Shropshire was all of a sudden these networks started to develop, and it was not the council that initiated them. It was existing civil society groups. For example, the Shrewsbury Food Hub, of which Katie was one of the founding members, or founding directors rather. The food hub was already plumbed in, and therefore when the council approached them, the food hub just said, no, no, you join our team. Come in, we're already doing it. And so those established networks were invaluable. And they were invaluable because they were based on not just the established pathways of getting things to and from and who's doing what, but trust. Because this is a profoundly human exercise. It's how we connect with and how we support one another. And change happens at the speed of trust, goes the quote. So part of my research background was, what do councils bring to the table in this? What do food partnerships bring to the table in this? And we each have unique tools in our toolkit that we can use to move these things along. For example, councils have policy levers, legitimacy, hopefully, quite often, some funding, and the ability to communicate to a wide audience, to hold formal meetings and to have people look up and pay attention. Whereas food partnerships and community groups are networked, they are people networks, they are boots on the ground, they know who's doing what, they know what works because they've been doing it quite often for years. And so they've got a lot of those things built in. By coming together, we can work solutions, we can work the problem. I talked about food systems thinking before, and one of the challenges that we face in councils is that they have their remit. This officer has their remit, that officer has their remit. It's very siloed. But food, just like climate, just like water systems, like energy systems, they connect, they connect with so many different things. We have to, even if it's just an academic exercise for the purpose of a food resilience plan, we need to break down those silos and think about where things connect. So I've talked about some of the other bits. Skilling up, I think, is essential. And well, I'll get to that, actually. Apologies. What I think is a really valuable exercise is knowing your community, knowing your landscape. We sort of go through our day-to-day lives without much of a thought to food. But what I would encourage you all to do is just to go for a walk in your community, in your space, and put your food systems glasses on and have a think about who lives in this space. How far is it away from the shop? Is it an affordable shop? If a crisis hit and this block of houses didn't have power, where would be our food hub? What would be our community kitchen? What assets do we have? And then you can look at your local geography and your local networks and assets and growing spaces in a completely different way, because those are things that you can mobilize and support and connect together in advance. As an example of what we've been doing in Shropshire, now I've sort of gone over this, so I'm not going to dwell on it too much, but in a sense, we've distilled for a pilot project those 8 steps that were in the other document into a sort of an easy to follow schematic, which just says, let's understand that context, assess our gaps, bring people together who are key stakeholders, facilitate those conversations. We love a community assembly that brings people together, and food is something that so many people, well, everyone can relate to. Then identify how we make an action plan. And how we communicate food systems crises, and also what underpins the practical actions. How do we support food activities that enfranchise people, that are accessible? How do we build networks? Remembering how to be people. We've been so conditioned to think that we are individuals and that we are standalone, and that has been isolating. But we have to remember that we're people, and also to build the links between town and country, city and hinterland, because everyone I talk to, I was just at an event last night in Oswestry, and one of the big themes was, well, we want our farmers to feed us, but we can't. And the farmers are going, well, we want to feed you, but there's a piece missing. So it's our job to try to problem solve those things. So just for fun, I'm going to tell you about what we've been doing on my farm. So realizing that, of course, we are not food resilient. And I have been working at the county level and trying to connect the dots on lots of different projects with our directors. But also, I have an asset on my doorstep. We operated as a market garden, took a step back from commercial trading, but realized just this year it felt very much like that knife edge of the early pandemic, where I had to sit and think, as a grower, what is my responsibility to my community in a time of crisis? And once again, I have come to the conclusion that it's our job to ramp up production again, so make the land productive. But the food resilience piece means upskilling our community. So that has included developing some course materials and some courses for free, because we need them to be accessible to the community. And those include seed saving, how to grow, bottling, canning, preserving the harvest in a number of different ways, composting, and generally it brings together an opportunity to have people connect. Sometimes food is a happy outcome, and all of our food goes to the food bank. All the surplus that we provide goes to the food bank first, and then additional surplus to the community. And we're exploring ways to connect more with a community chef role and potentially a Meals on Wheels delivery pilot, as well as a compost club pilot, because there are, just to be honest, there are enough horses around here that we could pull that one off easily enough. So this, and we also produce seed for our seed bank, and we're hoping to work more with the Heritage Seed Library to be essentially redundancy, to be an additional place to build up capacity and produce seed, because we need those distributed networks. Just one space isn't enough. So this is an example of 4 acres that we are trying to use for a positive impact to build community food resilience. And it has offered us an example to use in our food resilience strategy for Bishop's Castle. So we can whack that in a document and bring it to our council and say, there's lots going on. You just need to sign off and facilitate. Open doors for us. Help us work through the logistics of this. Make it accessible to people. So that's one example. So I've got a number of examples, and I'm just looking at the time. So Graham and Andrew, would you like me to I can open it up for questions at this point. I've got some examples of specifics that people could do that that are the sort of cheap and easy wins, I suppose. You let me know how you would like me to proceed on that, just so that I'm not overwhelming.
I, my own preference, Daphne, would be for you to go ahead and give people examples because I think they'll all be full of questions. And
Right.
if there are some answers that you've already got, then they'd love to
Sure.
hear them. That would be my view.
Wonderful. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Um, so my suggestion for a good place to start is most communities have growing spaces, allotments, or disused publicly owned land, which is where we can enter with an initiative from, excuse me, Incredible Edible called the Right to Grow. This is something that has been made public nationally, and DEFRA has gotten behind it to say we should all have the right to grow. And that is simply people can apply to grow food on publicly owned, disused land. So that means working with the local council or the county council if it's county council owned land to say, we see that nothing's happening here. Let's double check that it's safe to grow on. Here's our plan. This is how we'll engage the community. And then, in theory, the council should go, wonderful. We'll step out of your way and we'll sign an agreement and say you can use this space. Well done. And then you've got people who are more connected to their food system and using space that was previously unused. That's another avenue beyond allotments and community gardens. Although a lot of allotments have massive wait lists, we recommend a buddy system where people can join up with somebody who's already got an allotment, who maybe needs a little extra support in working that space, and there's the potential for knowledge sharing. We have the opportunity to work with different allotment societies, potentially seed saving at allotments. A lot of people say it can't be done. It absolutely can. There are lots of different ways to get surplus food and surplus seed into the community. We recommend grow a row for the seed bank, grow a row for the food bank, and through the food partnership, we provide training on a number of these things. Upskilling, like I mentioned, that we do on our farm, there are core skills that we've just forgotten about. But we still have people in our communities and organizations across the UK that give training, online training, in-person sessions, and connecting people with land. A great example is Land Match England, which is a new initiative that's been launched, working primarily with farmers and people who have land and are willing to share it, and people who are looking for land to get growing or to launch farming initiatives. So this is really one to look for. And there are coordinators that can support with land matching, depending on the region, or your local food partnership should be aware of this. So my view is that there is so much knowledge. There are so many resources. There's so much land. It's a matter of sharing and sort of rebuilding the idea of sharing in our communities, that we're all on the same team and sharing generously, particularly when it comes to the things that we know and not gatekeeping that knowledge. In Bishop's Castle, the pandemic prompted us to start a community seed bank. And this was largely because there was a run on seeds when there was a crisis. I suspect we're going to start seeing that again this time. That was because of that situation, our small scale seed producers had to close their web shops, limit their hours for processing orders, and they had to prioritize market gardens because we could grow more efficiently at scale. So as a market gardener, I was able to get larger packs of seeds and break them up so that we could share them within the community. Thus, the seed bank was born. Now the seed bank has gone from being available at our local farmers market once a month to having a place in a cantilever toolbox in our local library. And that makes it accessible anytime the library is open. Obviously, we know libraries are wonderful, welcoming, democratic spaces where people know that they can just go access things for free. So it has been a huge success. We've also been piloting one of these in Telford, and just today I spoke with our portfolio holder for libraries in Shropshire, who said we even have a mobile library service, and we have however many libraries. Yes, let's find some funding and see if we can make this work across more spaces. This is an example of micro infrastructure that just means the means to grow food is accessible to everyone. And that is so valuable. During the pandemic, communities in deprived areas might have space, or there were examples of, we've got space, we've got the will to grow, but they couldn't access seed. So again, seed is the foundation of our food system. That also doubles with things like machinery rings, tool shares, repair cafes, library of things. I love the idea of a library of things, knowledge and skills shares. And then we get into sort of bigger infrastructure, like, and it doesn't have to be expensive, setting up a local farmers market. It can rely on a few volunteers, maybe a part-time market manager. But having a local farmers market means local food access and direct sales and routes to market. Setting these things up doesn't have to cost the world, but they can have a profound impact. Gleaning networks, for those who don't know what gleaning means, it's a very old-fashioned word. It's a traditional process where the farmer would allow community members to come and sort of harvest the leftover bits of grain or produce that they couldn't harvest during the main event. So that might be oats or grains. But now gleaning typically means it might be using leftover field scale produce if they didn't fit specifications for, say, Sainsbury's or Tesco contracts. Or it might be collecting apples, sort of scrumping, collecting apples and fruit in a really abundant season like last year, and then it gets shared out by the community or used. And then we can think about things like, what are our transport connections to get food to and from? Do we have electric vehicles if fuel is impacted? Do we have space to store things? Do we have shops where we can distribute things, or community centers, or ways of processing food? And this is a really interesting one that we keep bumping up against in the food partnership because and it's common across the UK, is our infrastructure for processing has been stripped from the local level. The common example is abattoirs, but that includes machinery for processing grains and pulses, mills. So there are a lot of different scales of infrastructure that we need to bring back to the community level. A fun one where this is an interesting narrative, and how do we position this? Because we don't want people to panic buy, but we do want them to gradually build up their home pantry. And it's not about being a prepper as an individual. It's about, how do we prepare for our communities? How do we prepare with our families, our neighbors, and our communities in mind? Some of that can happen at an individual level, but there are economic implications there for many people. So how do we, with our churches and our faith-based institutions, our food banks, and our councils come together to have conversations about this and what rotation and storage and responsibility would look like? In the UK, we no longer have a central food storage, but many European nations have been re-implementing that and bringing that back in. We should take that as a hint. We have a number of interesting examples of rescue and distribution initiatives across Shropshire, and I know that there are many nationally. One that our food hub does is called Supersonic, which I think not only is it a great name, but it's a great initiative that uses surplus food. I won't call it food waste because it's not food waste. It's surplus food that they can make soups out of. The soups get frozen in containers, different size servings, and those can either be shared out through a community freezer or taken to schools or even used for the catering for corporate events. So it's a really great way of using that food. And we also need to be thinking about other systems in place. It's very easy, as I say, to talk about the silo of food, but food touches on our energy needs. We need to be thinking about water storage and what we take care of or how we store water, how we access clean water, prescriptions. Some of the things that people forget about most often are baby formula, and those are the fastest things to disappear off the shelves, diabetes medication, and people very rarely think about pets. So a few notable things that, and sort of any range of prescriptions, but people need to be thinking about that proactively and not panicking. And that's part of our communication and our guidance. I've talked about this. This is important, though. We need to think about our local food system, build up that infrastructure, those routes to market, and having those conversations to build relationships with the people who are working in our food system. And my advice and what my motto is now for our farm is lots of diversity of the things that we produce, go massive overkill, plant more potatoes. There is no downside. Um, Grow for abundance, grow lots, and then grow for storability. Be really practical. Spuds, squash, courgettes, onions, things like that that will store. Courgettes do store reasonably well, but how to store food and prepare food in those ways. And finally, I think I've harped on this enough. To be proactive and responsive is better to be than being unprepared and reactive. This is a way that we can connect with our communities, get in their headspace. And I think we have an incredible opportunity right now with the People's Emergency Briefing rolling out across everywhere. People are going to want to have these conversations or to understand, yikes, that's scary. What do we do next? And this is an opportunity to ride that wave and engage people. Um, we so often talk in an echo chamber about food and food systems in crisis. This is an opportunity where I think we might have more people from outside that echo chamber coming in. So we need to figure out how to communicate with them and not just communicate, but how to invite them in and say, we need you. We need the skills that you're bringing. People have different knowledge, experience, assets. It might be land, it might be money, it might be tools. We will need all of these things. So figuring out who's got what and how we can pull together is very important, but also scenarios, timelines, whose job is it if and when, specific responsibilities. And I can't emphasize this enough. Hard copies of things. We have become very reliant on digital systems, but if suddenly those are gone, the vulnerable persons register that you have been working to develop in your community and diligently getting people to sign up for, well, it's no good if you can't access an updated copy. So I would encourage people to think about what phone numbers, what documents, what protocols and resources you would need. So I think, oh, and that's my resources page. So I'll be sharing that afterwards. But that sort of brings us, what time is it? Let's see. Oof. Sorry, I talked a lot there. So I will unshare and we can do questions. And I'm happy to stay on for a bit longer since I rattled on for quite a while.
That was amazing. Wonderful.
Yeah, fantastic.
Was that too much? It's too much. There's so much there. It's just,
No, Daphne,
oh, it's all
you've got
happening, folks.
it was a fantastic presentation and I love the enthusiasm and the fact that every fact that you made hit home. And as you say, having right on the heels of the emergency briefing, it's wonderful stuff. I had a whole bunch of questions to go through, but I suspect other people have, and Andrew is already ahead of the game. So let's go to you, Andrew, please.
Well, just a quickie, obviously, thanks again, Daphne, for actually coming on for quite short notice to do this talk. It will be recorded and shared, but I've just made a note to myself, and we'll talk about it separately. It'd be good to have a questionnaire process that people can follow through at the local level to say all the things that you've been saying, picking out the ones that they need to look at, because just to make it easy for people. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And there are toolkits out there for community food assessment,
Okay.
but not there aren't any that I know of yet that specify. Actually, no, well, that's not true. I suppose some of Tim Lang's report looks at that as well. So do give a look at the just in time to just in case report. Because, I mean, go for the executive summary version and not the full honkin' thing because it's 300 and some odd pages. But it does have tools for a number of these things and how we can look at that. Another really great document from Sarah Bridle and et al. From York University is Pathways to Food Resilience. So that was that sort of tinderbox um, report that I showed. So
Good. I mean, going back to what you were, one of the things you were saying earlier about town and parish councils, most town and parish councils won't have addressed this issue of food resilience before now, apart from the ones that already have indirectly that have allotments. My mission, Jim, is to find the right wording and the right approach to get those places engaged. Many thanks again. Great.
wonderful. Yeah, that's something that I've read recently is when the chips are down, the only currency is calories. And I think it's all well and good for town and parish councils to go, well, it's just another thing to take on. And unfortunately, this was the view of when I spoke to our South Shropshire MP recently. He said, well, most town and parish councils won't engage with this because they'll think it's just another thing. And I said, well, it's just another thing until it's the thing.
Right.
And then it's unavoidable and you would have wished you'd done something about it. So yeah.
Somebody else to, yeah.
Yeah. Are there any other questions that people would like to ask? By all means, use the hand raised facility within Zoom, which is the easiest way. And Frank, you beat everyone to it, just in front of Stuart.
Thanks very much. This is just an observation that, from what I can see, one of the unintended consequences of COVID was that it created a whole generation of people who will now order online from Tesco or Waitrose or Sainsbury. And because they're doing that, because they no longer have to go out to shops, it's much harder for market gardens or community-led growing projects to get off the ground because people can just sit at their desk, press one button, and everything turns up for them. Is that something that you've experienced or other people have experienced? Or is that just something that we're getting here?
It's such an interesting observation. It is something that we have been talking about a lot in Shropshire because we have a lot of market towns, and we have through the food partnership we engage with a lot of schools, and what we have found is that there's an opportunity there. So we're part of an initiative that wants to get food farming and sustainability into the national curriculum. We've also worked with schools on decarbonization programs and ways to get young people, understanding food and across various things. That's a whole other conversation. But getting young people who have a lot of social anxiety about transactions and shopping, that really worries a generation, an aging out generation of market stall holders. And to think that our markets could decline because young people don't see it as a viable career option because they're not shopping there, they don't engage with it. What a cultural loss. So what we're doing is fielding some opportunities to get schools and young people into markets so that it's part of their food training, it's part of their curriculum. They can understand currency, real money, and they can understand what making a meal plan and a shopping list looks like, and going and talking to a person and understanding what they're buying and where it comes from. So there are so many interesting opportunities to rebuild that from an education perspective and show people the true value of food and that it's real people doing it. Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. I think I've got Stuart next.
Hi, thanks. It's been a great talk so far. I was just wondering what your view
All downhill from here.
of regenerative agriculture is. They were saying a little while ago that there's only so many harvests left in the soil in this
Yep.
country. My next door neighbour is the local farmer. He farms all the land around here. And I've been trying to persuade him to go in for regen agriculture.
Hmm.
But he says it's just too difficult at the moment. The farmers don't know whether they're coming or going financially.
Yep.
The cost of all these inputs has risen dramatically. And it'd be even worse now with the Straits of Hormuz being blocked.
Mm.
The ELMS funding seems to come and go. The Sustainable Agriculture Fund hasn't yet been decided. And the last thing on his mind is trying to change his agricultural techniques.
Yeah. Um, Peer-to-peer exchange is the strongest tool that we have for working with farmers. Um, it's been so embedded with a heck of a lot of money behind it over the last couple of generations that if you're not farming in a conventional way with this kit with and the bundle that your seeds and your chemicals come as with your farm manager getting a kickback from the big companies, then it's not real farming. If you're go big or go home, no longer is it small is beautiful. And it's disconnected farmers from farming. And the land and the systems that we're reliant on. And it's hard to walk that back. So the way that I have it's a gracious way of putting it, and I really value it, is everybody is at a different place on that regenerative journey. And we know that the science is stacking up in favor of regenerative farming. And when I say regenerative, just to clarify for everyone, it's taking a systems lens of how your land and your soil works, your plant systems work, your livestock stock works, your water system. All of these things are interconnected and can support one another. It's not so regenerative rather than degrading. We are not seeking to degrade our landscape further. We want to regenerate it. Um, and like sustainability as a term, that really got watered down. True sustainability got watered down by economic interests, just like regenerative is now being co-opted by big companies like the Cargills and the Monsanto that go, yes, yes, we advocate for regenerative. That just means a little bit less glyphosate. So, it's not methadone, like it's not a general phase out. In that sense, it's greenwashing. So we know that regenerative farming and diverse farming and small scale mixed farming is the direction that we need to go, not just to feed ourselves, but to take care of the soil and our life systems. Um, there will be no other option. It's really being held back by a hell of a lot of big money. Um, and maybe that's a way to frame it to your farmer friend. You've gotten locked into a system and it's a really, it's like getting hooked on AI and technology and all of these things. It's a difficult one, and I'm sure that in time he will be ready, but getting people to connect with other farmers who have been through it. I know this is a very long-winded answer. There's so much to say on it. Um, there are lots of resources. There are lots of training resources out there to get people thinking about regenerative farming. Um, and a great argument, particularly as costs are going up, is you save money by reducing your inputs. And you can have fewer animals, use your grass better, and have higher quality animals, and keep them out all year round. So there are lots of positive ticks for moving to regen.
I'll keep plugging away then.
Yeah,
Thanks.
definitely. Sue.
Hi, thank you. Couple of things. I had in my local area, we had a food partnership, which I linked in with when I could, but the member of staff left
Mm.
and they haven't been replaced. I haven't chased it, but I will do to see what's happening. But I don't know who, I know where she was based, but I don't know where the money comes from for the food partnerships. What would pay her? Just to ask you that.
Yeah, it depends. Food partnerships are often community interest companies or charities. Sometimes, if they are so fortunate as to be part employed by the council.
Mm.
They might be embedded within the council. Um, but quite often it's grant funding. As a food partnership, we survive off grant funding, and so that means
Mm.
it's constantly doing this. Um, so I might
Okay.
be able to make some inquiries through this, or you can email the Sustainable Food Places Network, and they might be able to tell you what the status is for your area. Um,
What was
because
that? Sustainable?
Sustainable Food Places, and I
Yeah.
will get the link for you, sustainablefoodplaces.org, and that is sort of an umbrella that convenes the sort of the food partnerships across the UK. So sometimes they get funding and they can channel it through to different
Mm.
ones, but it's not often.
Okay. Thank you. Then my second question is about the town council and being uh, how, that I'm going to be greeted with we've got enough to do, we can't keep up. Um, and I'm not feeling very clear about what I can do yet. I
Mhm.
did have I've been looking at the allotment agreement and trying to change that, saying they could sell their produce before we had a rule that they couldn't.
Right,
And so I've just initiated that, and that's as a result of learning and think about that. So you're incentivizing food production on allotments.
definitely.
Um, I'm not sure what else. I just would love some other ideas,
Yeah,
short of starting your own network and a big chunk of work.
yeah,
Would love some other ideas, really.
yeah, absolutely. I think an easy solution is a first step, rather, not an easy solution. A first step is doesn't cost a thing. Just have a community conversation.
Mm.
Open up the doors, book a 2 or 3 hour slot. Um, and I went to a great one yesterday in Oswestry, which just asked a really simple question, 5 or 6 different tables with people grouped around them. What is the future of food for Oswestry? And it was as simple as that. And it got people to, with some facilitation, not a whole lot. It wasn't very hands-on, um, but it did give the opportunity to give people, yeah, they shared their vision, they shared their hopes, they shared their concerns. And what you can do is sort of gather that data and say, well, people are really worried about, rising costs, and will there be empty shelves? And, will I be able to grow enough? Or do I know how? And you can start those conversations. And from there, you might be able to think about, well, do we need to put a little bit of a plan in place? Like, what do we already have? What are our assets? What are our gaps? Do we have key people who are community food leaders and champions already in this space? And reach out to them, call them in, because I I bet you've got boots on the ground that you don't even know about, and those are your allies. So build a partnership. There's a lot of opportunity.
Sue, if I could
Thank-
just back in with one organizational thought, it's very possible for a parish council to
mm,
create a work group which can be outside members of the organization. So they will report to you so you know what's going on, but you're getting all the volunteers to do the work because you don't have the capacity to do everything yourself.
Mhm.
So bring in people into a work group and go for it.
Yeah. We
And that,
somebody said about orchards. We have planted 2 orchards in our parish. But for me, the question is, so to get them to come, like to have a real benefit, that you get an apple that you take home and cook, which is what you want, and the community not having the knowledge base of leave it on the tree and how many years and all that. There's sort of lots of gaps, really. But work group is a good one as well.
yeah,
Thank you, Graham.
and that builds all of those conversations builds community ownership, which it's
Mm.
great to have council leadership, but to have a community take ownership of something it will become, it will take shape and become something that it needs to be through that. We don't have to hold everything ourselves. This is a situation, this is a moment in time where we have to open, release these sort of these ways of working and look to see what new comes of it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Of course, Caroline.
Hi there, guys. Yeah, I just interesting to kind of follow on from that. I've got something to offer first, which is that I once did a TED talk on how to create positive visions of our local food systems, and it's got like a step-by-step how to create a wonderful event to glean all of that information. So, if you want to find that, it'll be on YouTube. TEDx, creating positive visions of our local food systems.
Oh, that's fab. Could you drop a link in the chat afterwards?
I can do, yes, I can do that.
Lovely.
So I'm Caroline Weisbloom. I'm based in Frome, and we have quite a flourishing food network, and we are actively working on how do we create a more resilient food system. However, I think my question also relates to the previous one, which was we're struggling to get the town council on board. It seems to be that for years I've been going to the council saying, "Hey, what's your food policy?" "Oh, we haven't got any." "What are you doing on food?" And it's kind of slightly embedded in the climate strategy. But I actually work for the council now, in the resilience team, but working on energy. And yeah, we were hoping that they would take on food this year as well, and they just haven't. And again, it's just kind of a bit of a, oh no, there's other more important things to focus on. And what's more important than food and water? I mean, it's just, I mean, obviously energy, yes, we get it, but I think what I'm asking is how do we persuade our councillors that it needs to be taken on as a proper adaptation and resilience
Yeah,
project?
that's really frustrating. I feel for you. Yes, it can be because we have been so conditioned that we take food for granted. It shows up. It shows up when we click a button. It shows up in the grocery store. Um, you will, in Frome, no doubt have vulnerable communities, people who are hard to reach or disenfranchised or very reliant on the food bank. You might be able to gather information on how many more food bank users you've had since the pandemic, or how many school meals, preschool meals families you have, or pupil premium families you have, highlighting that there is a significant proportion of the population that's already vulnerable and subject to a bigger gap if and when a crisis comes, is, I have found, a useful lever in saying these are the people that you need to look after the most, and that you have to be responsible for. Obvious and I mean, it's frustrating because I have found that the knowledge in town and parish councils to be very low when it comes to understanding food, even basic health. So putting together a list of these are the different areas, climate plan, check, economic plan, check, supporting our local food systems, vulnerable people, public health, supporting, school meals, check, check, check. This is all the way that food can hit all of these spaces. And it overlaps. You can basically spell out to them that this is a superpower, this is a magic tool. But the national emergency briefing, or the people's
That's going to
emergency
be really
briefing,
useful.
I
Yeah.
think it's a really useful one. And to say, other places are doing this and they're leading on this. We need to see the writing on the wall. And the fact that we've got a food system crisis unfolding in real time where we might not be seeing it tomorrow, but we've received the last of the oil that we're going to be getting from the Gulf. It's
Yeah.
So we are going to start seeing impacts to our food system, and it's going to be a super El Nino year by the look of it, which is going to impact global food supply. Yeah, some accounts are saying that we're heading for essentially like a global food crisis and
Shortage.
potential famine situations. So, yeah, it's sort of teeing it up to say, team, this is serious. Like we're
Yeah.
not messing around. You have a responsibility to take care of people. So I've included some resources at the end of my presentation, which I'll share. And you can forward these to them and say, you know, this is Tim Lang's report. This is the sort of leading document. This is the next one. This is the next one. They're all stacking up to say the same thing. We need to do more locally. But yeah, if you, I mean, I've always wanted to come to Frome, so you know.
Oh, come visit.
Well, let me know, and I can shout at your council for you.
Yes, please.
I mean, speak with your council.
Thanks very much.
Lynn.
Hi, Daphne. I'm just down the road from you in Clun.
Oh, hi.
Hi. I'm the local nature recovery strategy coordinator.
Great.
So I've spoken to Jenny previously, but really keen to make links. Yeah. So the Eleanor Ethics published today, and we've been kind of working with, I'm sure you'll know Janet Cove in terms of, I'm working with Salk, and we've got a workbook which hopefully you might be aware of in terms of making Eleanor relevant for parish councils, which is great. At the moment, it doesn't really focus on food stuff, and it'd be really good to talk to you more about that, about whether we adapt that or whether we produce something a bit separate. But I'm also thinking from a health point of view, it doesn't really address some of those issues in that workbook, but really to kind of make town and parish councils, as you're saying, you know, kind of really aware of how they can help and make it easy as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, we have been, it is a great frustration of mine that local nature recovery strategies are a statutory responsibility, but having a food strategy for communities isn't. And they do dovetail hugely, and they're so complementary and important. So yes, I love the workbook, and I have talked to Janet about it would be great to get a food workbook essentially put together. It's something that we are working on for the food partnership. So it's going to more or less be a digital magazine for the time being, just because funding. But it gives us the opportunity to create a toolkit, like a food resilience toolkit, framed as a good news magazine. Here are some great examples of things that are going on. This is how, you know, these are the stories of our farmers and the people who are managing our landscapes in regenerative ways. Different tools to feed in for practical skills. So yeah, definitely it's a further conversation to have. I was just, sorry everyone, as we sort of talk local shop. I was just at the Shropshire Hills National Landscape Advisory Group meeting, and it was, you know, talking about how we fit these pieces together, and we're all really good at working in our lane, but what we need to do is all come together and figure out how the edges of the edges fit together with water systems, with food and farming systems, with climate systems and landscape systems. So yes, shoot me an email, or you can crash my upcoming lunch with Janet.
Oh, okay. I mean, yeah, amazing. That would be great. Thank you.
Cool. Michael.
Hey, sorry. Firstly, thank you. It's really interesting so far. I am sort of coming at this from a completely different angle, in the sense that I've been working with a couple of my clients who are food businesses. And one of the things that I did was I shared some resource that the RHS produced last year, Space to Grow report,
Okay.
which was really interesting, really quite diverse, about how people can take a proportionate part of their garden or spaces to grow vegetables, you know, sort of, and it was kind of sort of balancing around sort of food sovereignty. But what they've decided to do is run a couple of initiatives, both of the clients, where we're looking at creating spaces to grow. One of the clients has a cookery school with quite a lot of acreage, and they're planning to turn over part of that to work with the local parish community.
Great.
And so for me, it's what, sort of, I've tried to work with local parish councils before and councils before, and obviously we've discussed the frustrations that, they don't really see sort of food sovereignty as a priority over other things because of the political agenda at large. So for me, it's always been, sort of about people and communities actually empowering themselves to have, sort of tenure in it. So I think from my perspective, because this is relatively new and I'm looking at it from perhaps flipping it from, sort of governing bodies or sort of those kind of institutions to actual commercial interests being involved in actually creating grassroots and getting behind grassroots. So you mentioned greenwashing. A lot of people just use it as marketing speak, for PR or to add value to something that predominantly they're not doing. Uh, and so I think for me, it's very much, there are lots of people out there doing some amazing things in hospitality, in sort of running, sort of lovely little bakeries, like artisanal, sort of elements that is, not using, regenerative as a as a buzzword, as a practice, but actually really understanding the practice of what we used to do being important, and not this homogenized sort of system that we sort of all have fallen into the trap of. I'm waffling now, sorry. Once I get the microphone, I'm off. So I think from my perspective, because I have lots of grand ideas, I sort of come from a strategy perspective. So I'm always big picture. When working locally and looking at local parishes, this particular one is in Berkshire. I live around the corner from you, Daphne. I'm in Brunslow. So is there something really, I mean, you mentioned, sort of reaching out through parish magazines, gauging the interest of people, seeing who the boots on the ground are, who our champions are, maybe in the local community that can drive this. Is there anything else that we can be doing?
Oh yeah. I mean, I gave a few wee examples. I'll, if it's all right with you, I'll take Michael's question and then and Graham, then can I let you wrap up? I've got a 1:30 call. But yes, oh my goodness, there's so much to do. So corporate lens. Let's talk corporate lens. That's a really interesting one. A lot of organizations have a social value budget. Um,
Exactly.
so through the food partnership, recognizing that a lot of people don't understand food in the food system, in a broader sense. They might be a food business and focus on one area, or they might not engage with food very much, but they want to support their local community. Um, Through the food partnership, we offer corporate training. What does your local food system look like? What do food systems look like? What's food resilience and how you can contribute to it, how that impacts your business, what we can look at there. And people love to have corporate volunteering days where they go and, they paint the fence on their kids' football club. But where's the lasting impact in that? So what we
Yeah.
can do is we can go and talk food systems, talk food resilience to these organizations, and then bring them into their local community and have, a work day where they help build a community garden up and start an initiative like that, or support something as they're getting going, or to maintain something on a regular basis. So there are ways to do that. I'm a huge fan of an initiative called Food Not Lawns. And Food Not Lawns was started in the States because essentially lawns are a pointless monoculture that aren't natural. They're not diverse. They're a green desert. And now with the current climate, in summer, they just cook. But I think there's an interesting cultural narrative that we can sort of get on that. What about the traditional cottage garden? It was species rich. It was providing food. It was providing habitat. It was a showcase in your front yard. Um, and I think it would be wonderful to have examples of how we can dig up lawns and convert them back to traditional cottage gardens, and ways to enjoy that. We do our Shropshire Good Food Trail, so which is our way of showcasing our local food system and the people who are doing great things in it. If you have organizations that want to put their money where their mouth is once it comes to supporting a local food system, we have a crowdfunder, so you can nudge that towards your clients. And if people want to be engaged in in showcasing their local food system, they can be on our magazine, be on our map, and be a part of that as well. I don't know if that fully answered your question, but
It does. But I'd love to. I mean, obviously not now, but I'd love to pick this up with you separately, simply because there's something I want to do locally. I'm now a resident of Shropshire, so there's something I want to do locally as well. And I just think that I also I might be able to help the organisation a little bit coming from my consultancy background. So that would be
cool.
amazing. Cool.
Wonderful. We want
Thank
all
you.
boots on the ground. All gifts are
Great.
welcome.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Daphne.
Graham.
One last comment: the perennial request from everywhere is fundraising. Where do we get the money from to do all this? And we're finding more and more that community energy sources produce money. Any windmill or wind turbine will generate cash for the community. And we're talking in terms of tens of thousands of pounds per year that can go to the local council for funding these sorts of events. And so much can be done with so little that I just recommend to everyone that they look into that. We're going to be doing a session in the middle of June the 10th, I hope, on how you can set up your local energy organization so that you do indeed generate cash in the local community. So I just mentioned that to people in passing. And then let me move on, Daphne, because you've got about 30 seconds left to say thank you so much for a brilliant day. Everyone's loved it. The comments are still pouring in on the chat. So thank you very much. One question for you is, are you happy for me to put your email address on the Banter page?
Yeah, absolutely. I've just put my email in the chat for anybody who's still there, and I
Okay,
will
thank you.
share my presentation with you, Graham, coming up, and I'll probably knock a few more resources into it, just that I've mentioned in passing.
Fantastic. Where do you find the time? Well done.
Yeah, lots of coffee, lots of coffee.
Well, it's really been a pleasure to see you again. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for coming. And I'm sure we'll have something to talk about next week. Oh, yes, it's going to be the People's Emergency Briefing again. But
Wonderful.
thank you very much. Take care, all. Bye-bye.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.